Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, The Savage Caves. This is an interesting novel I found at the Solano branch of Coaz Books in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I found this one and 5 other of the D&D novels. What's interesting about this is that each of these novels primarily features the iconic characters of that edition. Now, when I first picked this up, I shared it with some friends online, and when we were digging through some old comments by various members of the WotC team at the time, the Wizards of the Coast team, it appears that Regdar, who is the fighter here, was kind of thrust upon the D&D art team by the marketing team. This, I'll reference the player's handbook from 3rd edition, which I covered in a previous video. The art that was used for fighter in 3rd edition handbook was of Tordek, the dwarf fighter. But near the release of the game, WotC's marketing team decided they wanted a human male fighter as the iconic fighter, and that a lot of the promotional art would use this character. And so when Todd Lockwood made this art, he was trying to make as ethnically ambiguous a human male as he could. According to his website, they were avoiding making another straight white male fighter. They wanted a wide array of ethnic backgrounds in their art. And the way you see this represented is actually on page 88 and 89. You can see art of Regdar as well as art of another character that is featured in this book but is not one of the primary iconic wizards, of which there are really 3 named, and the one here is going to be the kind of tertiary one. So first we have Regdar, that's him. Then we have Null. I don't know how well the camera is going to pick that up, but Null is a human wizard with a very unusual appearance, but also very kind of conservative look compared to the iconic wizard of 3rd edition, who is Miali, the elf wizard. And Miali has this very revealing outfit, and then the other iconic wizard is Nebin, the gnome illusionist. Illusionist being one of the primary types of casters, harkening back to AD&D. So this is Miali, and this is Nebin. So the various iconic characters are represented in the player's handbook, 3rd edition, but the primary fighter, the one that was given the focus in the section on fighters, is Tordek the dwarf. But when they made these novels, the ones they focused on first was Regdar the fighter. And so it's actually a ensemble party of Regdar the fighter and Jozan the cleric. They later end up saving Lita from being lynched because Lita, the halfling rogue, is accused of stealing from people in this village she's passing through. She's about to hang for her crime of theft. Jozan effectively requests that she be spared, but on parole. There's a danger, a threat to the village. Giant spiders attacking one of the outlying farm's sheeps, and Jozan says, "Look, please release her. I don't believe she is truly guilty of this, But as a cleric of Pelor, as a priest of Pelor, the primary sun god in the Greyhawk pantheon, as a cleric of Pelor, let me be the judge. She will be put to work to stop this threat, and if she is worthy of a second chance, I'll let you know. And so the villagers say, okay, this is a wandering priest of Pelor. Let's do that option. And so it becomes a party of Regdar the fighter, Jozan the cleric, and Lida the halfling rogue. And then while fighting the giant spiders, which in 3rd edition are titled Monstrous Spiders, which you can follow along in the SRD or just through your monster manual, they end up encountering Null, the human wizard. And pretty quickly, Regdar is attracted to Null. He thinks she's really pretty, but is trying to give her space because he doesn't want to just immediately hook up with anyone. He wants to be professional during the work. And the story progresses from this, where really I'm describing the human's perspective. At the start of the book, you follow a goblin, and the goblin is in charge of this tribe of goblins underground in the Upper Dark. And these hobgoblins, a group of about 5, have come in and want to be imperialistic, start conquering other goblin tribes and merging them into one that he is the king of. Now, the hobgoblins are twice as tall as any goblin, and so 5 strong warrior hobgoblins are more than enough to take most goblins, because the goblins are terrified both of their size and their strength. And on top of that, they have discipline, which most of the goblins don't really exhibit, and you have a fighting force that can very easily conquer others. So the goblins, as we follow in the first chapter, end up attacking another tribe closer to the surface. And by defeating that tribe, the spiders that tribe was kind of hurting ended up getting loose, and those spiders then got onto the surface and attacked those sheep. And so when Regdar, Jozan, Lida, and Null come down, they descend a rope ladder, and the rope ladder is made with spider silk rope. It's kind of sticky because it's spider silk, but it is strong and sturdy, and so it's able to support 2 humans as Regdar and Lida climb down the rope that they were using previously. What I really love about this book is that it's presented as if they're all level 1, and they discuss, for the most part, spells and effects as they would work in the game. And the one hiccup I found when talking to friends about this is that when Null is introduced to the group, she casts Sleep on a group of monstrous spiders that are still attacking Lida, Jozan, and Regdar. Now, it's described almost similarly to the way color spray is described in the player's handbook, but the duration of the spell really only makes sense if it's cast as a sleep spell. And online, Wizards of the Coast at the time provided a link to the iconics of that book and showed off their spell list. Color spray isn't on it, but sleep is. The issue is that sleep and color spray are both enchantment effects, mind affecting effects that only affect creatures with minds. And vermin, which is what the creature type of monstrous spiders is, vermin can't be affected by those spells. So technically, her introduction shouldn't work the way it would in a game setting. But everything else tracks. And so, as an example, when looking at the climax of the book, Regdar sees some goblins tossing other goblins over a ledge into a pit with two Krenshar. Krenshar are a magical beast of relatively low challenge rating that a fighter of first level would be able to fight. Regdar allegedly has experience with these, having dealt with them while serving as a soldier in the Duke's regiment. Regdar sees one of the goblins being tossed over while being bound and gagged, and he intervenes because, in his mind, even though they are goblins and they generally are evil, this is torture. So Regdar interferes. The goblin that he saves when they cut the bonds, and at this point in the story, the party has split by accident. Null and Regdar are in one group, and Jozan and Lida are in the other. Lida and Jozan are fighting the goblins that were the focus of chapter 1, and Regdar and Null are saving the victims of that goblin raid in the first chapter. And when Null cuts off the bindings for this goblin, the goblin picks up a stick and helps to defend Null and Regdar. Not all goblins have discipline, not all goblins have courage, and the former chief of the goblin tribe in chapter 1 doesn't have any of those heroic or leadership qualities, but this one that is being fed to the Krenshar is being fed to those beasts because he exhibits certain qualities that could possibly start a revolt against the hobgoblins in charge of this gathering of goblins. So he's being sentenced to death. Regdar doesn't like that. He doesn't like the method, at least, and so he interferes. Now, the encounter is actually pretty interesting because the encounter is designed as a very difficult encounter for a first level character. There's 2 first level characters there. They shouldn't, in theory, be fighting this. This is the situation where they would be watching and gathering information. But because of his courage and because of his mindset, his outlook, Regdar interferes and engages with an extremely difficult encounter. But if we look at the numbers of the different creatures they fight and the types of creatures they fight throughout the book, what you get is an adventure that should, in theory, bring first level characters with 0 experience to level 2 by the end of the book. And by the end of the book, the goblins are free of the hobgoblins, and the one that is saved by Regdar and Null offers them shelter for a couple nights while they recover their strength and then return to the surface. So in this case, it also features some diplomacy or some interactions. Lida speaks Goblin, and so she serves as an interpreter, and what they are willing to do is be on neutral terms with this tribe of goblins. And the other tribe of goblins, the aggressors in chapter 1, become kind of left to their own devices, but are diminished in strength. So the goblin situation returns to the status quo after the end of the book, and in theory, they should be level 2 player characters by the end of it. And that's one of the things I really like about this book. It's only 180 pages, but it's 180 pages of pretty good content describing how they get to higher level. I'm going to be covering some of the other books in this series in later videos, but I really wanted to cover the Savage Caves. I was doing some work figuring out the effective encounter level and experience rewards for another one titled City of Fire, featuring the paladin Barbarian, Null, and Regdar. And in that case, what I found was that assuming those characters are level 4 at the start of the book, by the end of their adventure, they should have just enough experience to reach level 5. So when I looked at the numbers for the Savage Caves, I found that really each of these books is framed so that they should be giving a single level of experience to the characters involved. So I really like that within the context of this series, the characters are engaging with their world in the same way and with the same restrictions and allowances that a D&D player's 4-person party would while playing the game. You know, minus a couple hiccups or mistakes like that monstrous spiders shouldn't be affected by the spell sleep. But for the most part, this all makes sense and it works so that you can picture your character in that adventure. How would my character with this set of feats, this set of class abilities fare against the threats? And what's also cool is that they use in this book the classic 4: fighter, priest, mage, thief. And those are the 4 archetypes of classes in D&D going back to OD&D, and in AD&D that's basically what it is. In 3rd edition that's basically what it is. In 4th edition, each of those classes becomes one of the primary roles, fighter being defender, rogue being striker, cleric being leader, and wizard being controller. Those being the 4 primary, those being the 4 types of classes in 4th edition, and then moving into 5th edition, those classes remain as prominent as ever. So I like the class makeup within this party. I like that the characters were originally picked so that they would be kind of ethnically neutral. It's just a really fascinating framework for D&D adventures. I wish that with 5th edition they had done something similar featuring those iconics, especially because Pathfinder pretty famously used each of their iconics for their comics, for their books, for adventures. They suggest which iconics to use for pre-gens. So Pathfinder took those iconic characters and really ran with them as a marketing tool in a much better way than Wizards of the Coast ever did. But as far as these novels go, those iconic characters are used exceptionally well. I do not recall how much I paid for each of these books, but I know it was very small. I think usually half price when it's listed, so in this case, I'd be paying $3 for each book. And if I look online, I'm not going to find them for anywhere near as cheap as I found them in person at Coes Books. But checking Coes Books both locations since then, I haven't found any of the other books in this series. I've looked at other used bookstores in the area. They don't have copies of this book series. And what I found is that a lot of the used bookstores in New Mexico and Western Texas, they tend to focus on history books rather than fantasy books. Coes is very unique in that they have a large fantasy and fiction section. So I don't know that I'll find them as cheap as I paid for them ever again, but I think I'd be willing to pay full price for these. It's just a really cool facet of D&D history. So I enjoyed these. If you like Dungeons and Dragons and you don't mind a quick 180-page novel, then this is a good pickup for you. So yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.